Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LeanTossup Major 2 Call of Duty podcast. Well, we're already at Major 2, and it's not quite February yet. We are recording this at the weaning hours of January. But yeah, this is the earliest we have had a Major 2 in actually since the inception of the CDL. This is really early. We're just motoring through here, but we've got an amazing weekend of COD coming up. Oh, every time they do a major, it's always very special. I'm really excited for this. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host CDL Metrics to talk about them all. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Yeah, looking forward to the Boston Major. It's the first CDL event in Boston in quite some time. I'm sure it'll be a rocking venue. Obviously, quite a bit different than Major 1 back in Raleigh that we had with the challengers teams qualifying, the group stage, all that sort of stuff. It's kind of thrown out the window. We're back to kind of your standard major setup. All 12 teams are here. 8 teams start in winners bracket, 4 teams start in losers bracket, and we go Thursday through Sunday. No simultaneous matches, which I'm kind of bummed about. That was a fun thing we got to see at Major 1, but we'll at least get a chance to see every single match with them being one in a row and give our full attention to those. So, yeah, very excited. I think I would say, like the deepest major we've had in a while in terms of just who we expect to win, who has a realistic chance of winning. Like I think there's a number of teams you can make a case for, and even a number of teams in the losers bracket who could play spoiler on day two, as early as day two. So a lot of storylines going into it, and I am super excited to catch all the action this weekend.
Yeah, and the thing about the Call of Duty League this year is that it seems like the the obviously before we've had like a very top heavy league where we have one or maybe two top teams. We definitely saw this a bit more last year, but honestly, there feels like there is like four or maybe even five teams that could win it all this week. Right, and I think this is one of the more open ones we've seen. I really can't think of one where like 'cause, like before you would always be like, okay, well, there's always Phase, and there's always one or two other ones. And last year was always a year of surprises. Like I don't think anybody saw Optic winning Major One. Actually, no, there was some Optic. Actually, no, there was like very little actually because Optic lost their first two matches. So there was no one who saw Optic winning Major Two. Definitely no one who saw LAG winning Major Two. Um,
Even
Surge,
just major one of this
yeah.
year, like looked at my old tweet of the implied odds to win major one, as we headed into the week, and New York subliners, who eventually did win, had a 5% implied probability. It was something like sixth or seventh among all 16 teams that qualified. So even that, right, that was a surprise to us all. New York never dropped a map all weekend. They look dominant. All of a sudden, they're the number one team in the game. When before we thought it was still Phase, Optic, Toronto, like someone else, Thieves even, right? After coming off a champs victory and a major four victory last year. So, yeah, like crazy stuff happens at these majors. And this could be no exception to that. But it does feel like we have a pretty solid idea of who those teams are that could realistically win. Um, and it just feels a little deeper than majors past or years past.
Mhm. So, all right, in that case, then let's start looking at some of the futures here. We do only have four games to talk about. Obviously, there's other games, but let's talk about the outright markets here. So I'll go through, I'll list them all off, and then we could talk about which teams we could see winning this and where some value is. Subliners, plus 250, Phase plus 300, Ultra plus 400, Optic plus 550, Boston plus 750, Minnesota 9 to 1, Thieves 10 to 1, LAG 25 to 1, Seattle 33 to 1, Legion 50 to 1, Mutineers 100 to 1, and Ravens 250 to 1. And then with to reach the final, every single one of those odds is functionally halved. Like Subliners is even, Phase plus 125. Ultra, actually, it's slightly worse than half. Ultra is 175. Optic plus 250. Breach plus 350. Rocker plus 400. Thieves plus 450. LEG plus 1200. 12 to 1. Seattle 16 to 1. Vegas 25. Florida 50. And then London 125. So the thing of it is, looking at this board, right? And I've not run my major model. I probably won't. I probably won't have time for that this week. I was changing up some graphics for my other model, so I probably won't do that. But um, which teams do you think, which teams do you think could actually win this major? Like looking at this board, which teams can you see winning this?
Yeah, so very, very good chance of winning. I have two teams, those being Toronto Ultra at number one and New York Subliners at number two. Now, those are my top two rated teams in the league in that order. I do have Toronto just slightly ahead of New York. And I actually give both of those teams a better than 30% chance of winning, which might be a little high, all things considered. Um, but those two teams stick out to me as if you're just going to pick two teams versus the field, like those are the two that could get it done. Their opening matches aren't super difficult. Toronto plays LA Gorillas, who lucked into an upper bracket start because there were four teams that were 2 and 3, but on tiebreakers, LA Gorillas made it through. We already saw that matchup in the qualifier stage. Toronto handled them relatively easily. I expect that to be the same result on Thursday when they play. And then, yeah, New York Subliners start versus Minnesota Rocker, who did go 3-2 in the qualifiers, so a decent record. But they're just very inconsistent. I think we know they're not really on the same levels as Subliners. So the two best teams in the league having relatively soft landing spots on Thursday sets them up in a huge opportunity to make a nice winners bracket run and get all the way to Sunday relatively quickly. So those two teams stick out. I think there's a clear number three team, that being Atlanta FaZe. Um, obviously struggled a little bit during the qualifiers and like honestly throughout Major One. A little reliant on search and destroy. That continues to be good for them. Hardpoint and control, not quite elite. Definitely above average for that team, but still not quite there. Um, so I still have Atlanta as my number three team in the league. The problem with them is they start versus a Boston Breach team who I have as the fourth best team in the league. So that's a pretty tough match for FaZe right out of the gate against Boston Breach. They played in the first ever match of the year, and Boston actually did win that 3-1. So that's a not great landing spot for FaZe, but the fact that if you get to the winners bracket, or I'm sorry, if you get to the grand finals on Sunday, right, it's a best of seven. You play at most, right, two hard points, three searches, and two controls. So that structure of a series is a little more favorable to teams that are good at search and good at control. Hard point matters a little bit less. So, hard point not a super strong game mode for FaZe for the time being. But if they end up in that grand finals, they have a nice, they have that 3 out of 7 games as searches if they need it. So FaZe are there at my number three team. And then it's kind of the rest of winners bracket. They're all kind of clumped up there in a tier below. I have Boston in fourth, Thieves in fifth, Optic in sixth, Minnesota in seventh, and then I actually have a losers bracket team in eighth. I have Vegas coming up next. That kind of goes into that like search and destroy argument I made earlier. Vegas's search and destroy is phenomenal. And if they somehow go on a crazy run to make the grand final, having that extra search and destroy game matters quite a bit. So they come in at eighth. And then it's kind of the rest of the teams. LA Gorillas, I will say my numbers are probably a little lower on them than they should be just because they've looked quite a bit better since switching the roster over. Seattle Surge come in at 10th. Florida Mutineers at 11th, and London Royal Ravens rounding out the 12 teams. So I don't know if those are similar to yours, but I mean that's what I've got for the time being.
Yeah, I think that's about where I am too. I mean, the one number that really sticks out to me, and I just thought was so weird when seeing it, is Ultra behind FaZe.
Yeah, that to me is just dead wrong. Like we've seen enough now where we should feel comfortable saying that Toronto is a better team than FaZe right now. at least.
Yeah, I mean, FaZe had two losses. Toronto did have one loss. Now both lost to Optic, who's weirdly behind them, but close behind. You're 4-1, 550-1. Um, it's such a weird thing, and basically this market is saying the subliners have the best chance, and then someone between FaZe, Toronto, Optic, and Boston they have a chance, and then you're kind of looking at your other tiers out. Vegas does have a shot at a losers bracket run. The thing of it is, I feel like the square bet is on LAG because like the problem is like LAG at 25-1 seems really low, but they're running up against Toronto, right? So they're basically this would be okay. Toronto needs to make an insane losers bracket run, right? Like LAG would have to beat Toronto to get to the finals, then, right? Like, is it doable? Yes. Is it likely? No. Right? And LAG did have a really tough schedule this round, right? Like they had FaZe, they had Ultra, and they did win, I believe, 3 games. So like they
Ooh.
had a good like this will be a team to look for next major as well. And they are still evolving as a team. There are a couple of well, some of them are veterans, but there is also some rookies on this team too, right? Assault is a veteran, but I believe Joe DeCease's never been in the CDL before, as are some of the other ones. So they're still getting the hang of it as a team, and they do look promising. But that the 25-1 though, that's really tempting though, right? And I mean the thing of it is again with some of these, you're still gonna have chances to bet them, right? Like with your ones that are really out, if LAG were to beat Toronto, at most that price is only getting halved, right? Like you're not gonna see LAG 8-1. You're probably gonna see them at like 12-1 or something, and you could pick that up on day two if they look really really good against Toronto. But they just could not hang with Toronto at the end of that hard point, right? FaZe seems massively overpriced. FaZe is not nearly as good as people think it is, but like it's weird though at the same time, right? Because they beat subliners. Now, to be fair, a lot of caveats in the word beat subliners because they beat them in a game 5 that was played with massive amounts of shutdowns and just a whole mess of things. So there's definitely an asterisk on that game. But then they lost to Optic, and then this FaZe team almost lost to LAG, and then this FaZe team did lose to who did they lose to? Surge? No, they beat Surge. Who did they lose to?
This stage
Rocker.
they
They lost
lost.
Rocker and Optic. Yeah.
Yes.
So they're so weird, and like I feel like they're like they could catch on and win the weekend, or more likely is they don't win. But the problem is that 3-1 price implies that they're gonna be one of the top teams, right? And like there is no real evidence that they're better on land than other teams, right? I mean, last year they didn't win a single event, right? They won things in Cold War when I don't think those. I think only one or two of the Cold War events were actually on land. Last year they made a bunch of finals. That's fine, but they didn't win any of the finals. Actually, they missed a couple of the finals too last year. Haven't made a final yet this year. Obviously, it's the second major, but this is the thing. Like this FaZe team might not be as good as people think. But I also feel like that's protection, right? Because if you hang FaZe 8-1, everybody's going to immediately bet FaZe 8-1, right? So I feel like the book was kind of stuck where they need to put it. So I don't know. I don't Boston at seven. A lot of these aren't really good prices. Like I feel
No.
like Boston 7-1. If that was higher, I'd consider it. But the problem is they beat it phase. They beat phase, which I think they definitely can beat phase. Then you're staring down Toronto immediately after that, right? Then you're immediately staring down Toronto to get to the winners bracket. Optic and Thieves 12-1. They looked a little better with Kenny back, but that good. Like this is the thing, right? Like there's a case to be made that none of these are particularly good, and a lot of these are horribly priced, right? And I kind of lean with that. A lot of these are pretty badly priced. Like I see Toronto, maybe LAG, maybe what's LAG to LAG? What 12-1 to reach the final? 12-1 to reach the
Correct.
final. That's not bad, but the problem is you're probably being doomed to a long losers bracket run on that though, right? So I don't know. I
Yeah, the one thing with LAG, right, they are turning things around. They are in a tough spot in this bracket, right? They go up against Toronto in their first game, right? To me, that's the best team in the game right now, according to my metrics. So you have to play the best team right away now, With that being said, right, we've seen it before. If you can take out the best team or one of the best teams in winners round one, your path opens up quite a bit. I don't think that's the case with this team. If they win, they play the winner of Boston, Atlanta, who again are my number 3 and number 4 teams in the league. So you have to beat the number 1 team, then you have to beat another top 4 team. Then you presumably have to beat either New York, right? Probably Optic or Thieves, another, you know, top 6 team, top 4 team again maybe. So it's a gauntlet if you want to make it through that winners bracket run. On the flip side, right, if you lose to Toronto right away, if you're LAG, you're in losers round one, which is already almost a death sentence, except when they won Major 2 last year doing the same thing. But yeah, if they lose, they go down and play Las Vegas Legion, who to me are the second best team in losers, maybe the best team of those four that are starting down there. So uh, it's tough either way. A very likely outcome for them is just lose lose and they're out. Um, and even if they win that game versus Toronto, which is going to be tough, like eventually they're going to run into a team that just is going to beat them because they have been improved. Like the improvement that we've seen from LA Gorillas is noticeable, right? Going from stage one to stage two, they look like a competitive team that might be in the mix with teams like Rocker and Thieves and Breach. Even maybe they can get close to, um, but yeah, a losers bracket run that starts with Vegas honestly does scare me a little bit. Just knowing that Vegas is so dominant in search that Vegas show up in search and can be anything in hardpoint or control, like they actually could be a team that starts in the losers bracket that goes on a decent run. So
Yeah, that is concerning, right? This Vegas team is the best version of a team with the name Legion. We have seen in forever, basically in the Call of Duty League. The thing of it is, you're right. Like the ability for them to win a game five means that if they steal any hard point, then you can lose, right? If they steal, basically, if they win any hard point, and they did against Optic, which is again insane that they beat Optic, but they win any hard point, you are in deep trouble. It means that you have to win that control and then also win another search, right? Like if you don't do that, you're in deep trouble. But that being said, though, their search has been faltering just a little bit. Some of the
true.
best teams are better than them at search. They're a good search team, but I think the best search teams are better than them. Now, I don't know if the LEG is that good of a search team, but it's a fascinating thing we're gonna have to see. This weekend is gonna be a very interesting weekend to see on how on how where Vegas goes, and what about Surge is like the thing is Surge has been known for some good runs on land, and again I'm seeing some tactical Rab videos today. I didn't watch it, but it's saying Pred is getting tired of carrying, which is something we've mentioned, right? We've mentioned this a lot, where it's Pred and Sib going off, and then the other two members of the team, Accuracy and Mac, being negative or barely positive or something along the lines, and like you're seeing Matt like good numbers out of Sib and Pred, and then basically Accuracy and Mac are being dragged along behind. And it's like whatever they could do is cool, but basically Sib and Pred are carrying the team. And this is the problem. At a certain point, that's not enough, right? And if basically we're at the point now where like they have to have a good week, like they have to be good and have a good weekend for them to win any games, right? If they don't have a good weekend, they're not winning anything because you could throw enough people at Pred to shut them down. But if you're getting free kills every time Accuracy turns around a corner, that's a problem, right? And this is the
Yeah.
thing. So the question is, like, where do you come on Surge? Like, do you think is this a team that do you see this team going on another one of their primo storied um runs, or do you think this is it? This is the last run for this team, and we're going to see some changes after Major Two, or do you?
Yeah, I think a pretty likely scenario for them is they just lose their losers bracket match, right? I talked about Breach and FaZe. They're the number 3 and 4 team. Flip that. They're the number 4 and 3 teams in the league according to my numbers. Someone's got to lose that, and the loser of that plays Surge. So that's a really tough start for Seattle to have to play somebody that good. But that's the thing with this winners bracket is there's a lot of competitive teams, and half of them are going to lose on their first day. So losers bracket is going to be a gauntlet on Friday. And it'll be sad to see some quality teams bow out of the tournament so early. But yeah, Surge is tricky. I do have Surge power ranked eighth still. Maybe with the way they've been trending lately, maybe slide them down a spot to ninth. But like, yeah, their respawn is still very good. Like, I have them as the number one hardpoint team in the league. I have them as the number three control team in the league. And I have them as the 11th best search and destroy team. And that honestly surprises me. I got to look up who's worse than them. Bear with me one moment. They're in a virtual tie with London Royal Ravens. A worse winning percentage, but Seattle has played a pretty tough search and destroy schedule to date, so that kind of bumps them up a little for me. But I mean, I talk about it every week, right? If Seattle figures out search and destroy, they can be one of the best teams in the league. And we saw glimpses of it last week, right? They didn't win any search and destroy games they played, but they went to a round 11 twice, I believe. Let me double check that, but it's getting closer. They might be figuring out just the maps they need to play. Let me double check. Yeah, so Seattle played two search and destroys, one against New York on El Asilo. That went to a round 11 and lost. And then they played Minnesota on Embassy. That also went to a round 11 and lost. And those are two quality search and destroy teams, New York and Minnesota. Minnesota, I guess, more middle of the pack, but New York, a very good search team. They're good in everything. But yeah, it's tough for Seattle. They just figure out that game mode, and like we'll view Seattle in a completely different way. But I mean, until they get wins on the board, it's hard to imagine them getting any versus anybody, unless, of course, I guess London, according to my numbers, are just as bad. So we'll see if they meet at any point. That'll be a hell of a search and destroy match. But yeah, Seattle, according to my numbers, yeah, they need some help in search. It's getting there, but I don't know, maybe against some easier opponents, they can get it done. But the problem is, right, you're going to play Boston, you're going to play FaZe. If you run into FaZe in losers bracket round one, I mean, those search and destroys, you can kind of kiss goodbye. And yeah, if Boston comes down, yeah, maybe they can get a search and destroy win on them. Um, but Boston are pretty good at respawn, as are Seattle. So that could be a really close game, actually. But um, yeah, Surge is one of those teams that I mean they did this last year a lot where they would come out in a major or qualifiers and look hot and then completely disappoint the next month and then the month after that they look good again. It was just very up and down. They ended up winning a major last year. Um, and yeah, so far this year, right, a second place finish and a whole lot of losing online games. So, maybe they step it up on LAN. They seem to always do that. But yeah, to me, just the fact that they don't get to play like a middle of the pack team right away, they're going to have to probably play Boston or even a FaZe team in round one. That's just a tough way to start their tournament.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think they're in trouble for some of that stuff. So, all right, before we go on to the matches, one quick little thing for those on Bet365. This market is not available on Bodog. It might be available tomorrow. I don't know. Bodog sometimes adds some stuff late, but who knows? But one market that I really like on Bet365 is Tournament MVP. They have player specials, so you have highest KD ratio, and then you have tournament MVP. Highest KD ratio is kind of random in the sense that any like you don't have to win the tournament to have like you could be eliminated much earlier and win highest like someone in the in one in like I mean anybody on any team could theoretically have the highest KD ratio, right? Like someone could get eliminated in the second round and have the highest KD ratio, right? It's based on kills divided by deaths, right? So it doesn't matter if you have more kills than them. It's just in terms of deaths, right? So the one I actually really like is obviously the one future I'm playing is Ultra 4-1, Scrappy 9-1 tournament MVP. That is pretty tempting. That's a
It's
pretty tempting price.
Yeah, yeah, that's very, very tempting. I already think that Toronto to win the major or to reach the major final are both really, really good plays. Plus 400 to win outright, plus 175 just to make the final. I actually do like to reach the final a little more. And I know that's been a theme with me over the years, but I did do the math. There is a little less VIG on the to reach the final market, and that's probably why I like it so much. Um, and the fact that they start with a pretty favorable start on Thursday also boosts their odds. So yeah, Toronto, if you're gonna go with an MVP, it feels like Scrap is gonna be the guy. According to my numbers, he's been the best player of the year so far. Um, and like, if they're gonna give it to somebody on Ultra and it's close, it feels like the tie will go to Scrap. They want him to be, a new face of the league. He obviously has a huge personality, likes to, trash talk on stage, likes to be the center of attention. So if he puts up a huge tournament and Ultra end up winning, like, very good chance Scrap could win MVP. Standy maybe could, right, if Ultra win. I can see him maybe making a big run. His KD numbers might be a little inflated because he's so good in respawn. And just your raw KD is going to be better if you're a good respawn player like he is. So I could see Standy winning it. I could see Insight winning it too, but just, if it's close, it's going to go to Scrap, and he's the best player anyway. So I love, yeah, that 9-1 is perfect.
Yeah, I like that number too. So, all right, now let's get into the four matches we have. Then we'll talk about the four we don't have yet. Um, First up, Subliners versus Minnesota Rocker. This is at 1:30 start time on Thursday. So remember, guys, this isn't three. Now there are only four games, which is weird that they're trying to get everybody out of here by 6 o'clock, or well, roughly 6 o'clock. But there's only four games on Friday, but there will be five games on four on Thursday, five on Friday, and then five again on Saturday, and then I think four on Sunday, including the final. So a bit weird that we only have four games that are starting at 1:30, but that's okay. We're getting some afternoon COD. That's totally fine on Thursday. Subliners versus Rocker 1:30. Subliners minus 1.5, minus 110. Rocker plus 1.5, minus 120. Subliners minus 240 on the money line. Rocker plus 175. Over 4.5 plus 170. So I actually have a little bit of value on Minnesota here. I
Wow.
actually like my model actually has the plus 1.5 for Minnesota hitting at about 62% of the time, and then conversely, the subliners minus 1.5 only hitting at about 38% of the time. So there is some slight value in Minnesota. I'd price this money line at minus 150, um, which is not what we're seeing here. So yeah, that's a little this is one of the reasons why I'm a little hesitant to bet subliners, right? I mean, they did lose to FaZe, but then they also got crushed. They also killed my over, which great when they lost to subliner Surge too, right? So this team isn't perfect, right? Like they did win the last major and they have gone on some runs, but this has maybe this on these online qualifiers have exposed a couple little cracks here. So I I don't think it's impossible to see Minnesota win this match. I don't think so. This Minnesota team maybe could go on a little bit of a run here. I mean, you're going to beat, you win this game. You then play the winner of Optic Thieves. You could probably win that match. That's not horrible. Then
Yeah,
you're,
as a rocker fan, like, sorry to cut you off,
yeah, yeah.
but this tournament sets up pretty nicely. Like, obviously, you're starting against New York, who are maybe the best team in the game, definitely top two in my opinion. But again, it goes to that argument of like, if you can beat that team right away, and maybe there's not a better time to play them than one of the first matches of the weekend, it opens up for you, right? Your next game is probably easier, right? You would call it easier against Optic or Thieves. I would expect Rocker still probably underdogs to definitely Optic, and Thieves would probably be close to a toss up. Um, but it's easier, nonetheless. They're not going to be a plus 175 underdog to whoever that is. So, yeah, there's definitely a possibility they can go on a little run. And even if they lose, right, they fall down and play London Royal Ravens, who to me are the worst team in the league. Granted, that means something a little different this year, right? In years past, we would talk about the worst team in the league, cough, cough, Paris Legion. And it would like they were so far and away the worst team in the league that it was an auto win, right? If you fell down and played them in losers bracket, not always, right? I remember my fair share of Legion victories in losers bracket round one that made no sense. But if Rocker fall down against New York and play London, that's not a gimme. But of all the teams you can fall down and play against on Friday, London is a nice bet. Um, they did have to reverse sweep them this stage, so that was a little closer than you'd like as a Minnesota fan. But honestly, where they landed in the bracket, obviously they needed to beat Seattle to have a nice winners bracket start. They did that in convincing fashion. That was all good to see. Um, so yeah, I expect probably most likely scenario with Minnesota, they'll lose to New York, drop down to play London, should be favorites in that game, and then would likely play Florida, Optic, Thieves, one of those three teams, and they've got a good shot to do that too, to win that hypothetical game that they dropped down to. But in this game, I know you said you kind of lean Minnesota.
Mhm.
My numbers indicate a lean towards New York. However, the more I look into it, the more I think it's just a pure stay away. Um, and specifically because of control. So interesting nugget here. New York, win percentage wise in control, are the third best team. They're 12-5. It's a 71% win rate. Minnesota 10-4 on the year. 71% win rate as well, slightly better than New York, but both teams about the same in control. Just due to overall round count and who they've played, I do give New York a pretty sizable bump in my power rankings. So New York I have as the second best control team. Minnesota falls all the way to sixth. But when you look at what map they might play, it really points to Fortress as the map that is going to be played. Minnesota don't like to play Greenberg Hotel. Um, they've played it 3 times all year, and it's actually the most popular control map. So Minnesota, I don't mind that strategy of just like, if we're bad at the most played control map, that is fine by us. We'll just veto it every time, and teams have to play us on something else. Minnesota perfect on El Asilo. New York 0-2. Again, a map they love to veto. They haven't been good on it when they have played. And all that points to Fortress, and both teams are solid on that map, and a map that's very defensive heavy, right? If you just it's like Gavutu last year. If you can just win on offensive ticks, good chance you can get that defense in round 5 and pull out the victory. The problem, right, is New York have been so good at offense this year in control that it might not matter. But yeah, if you just up Minnesota's control numbers on my sheet, they've got a decent chance of winning the series or at least covering like a map and a half. So, all in all, I think these prices are about right. I do expect New York to win, probably going to be a 3-1, but I'm definitely cheering for Rocker. And if they can even push it to a game 5, I think that's a world of good for that team and just their prospects moving forward in the tournament.
Yeah. Yeah, there might be some value on some Minnesota markets here. Minnesota maybe plus 24.5 against the subliners. Again, they Minnesota beat Seattle. New York did not beat Seattle, right? So by second order dominance, Minnesota is a better
True,
team, right? So that is
true.
now again, obviously they are
These
not
teams, I
favorites for. Mm,
these teams did meet in the Major One group stage. They were in the same group. New York did 3-0 them. It was pretty convincing. Um, and then obviously New York just went on the run where they did not lose and they won the tournament. So we have seen this match before. It did go convincingly to New York. It wasn't like a 3-0 where it could have gone either way. It was dominance. Um, so yeah, New York I fully expect to win, but I am hoping Minnesota can at least make some noise in this first match.
mhm. I have some hope. So let's see what happens. Second match, Boston versus FaZe. Boston plus 1.5 minus 155. FaZe minus 1.5 plus 120. Boston plus 149 on the money line. Just can't give us the plus 150, can you? You just can't give it to us. Phase minus 190 on the money line, over 4.5 plus 160. The thing of it is, I actually have Boston favored in this game. And the thing is, the fact that this line is so narrow, they're basically begging you to bet phase. They are saying, "Oh man, you're only getting phase at like 2 to 1, like 1 1 2 slash right. 20 on phase gets you back 10, right? Oh, minus 1.5 is plus money. Ooh, tempting, right? Like this is the thing. This feels like when I saw this line in Bet365, it's the same line too. It's a similar line. They're giving you the plus 150 on Boston. It feels like this is a trap. It feels like they're luring you into betting on phase. They're like, all right, come on, go ahead, put your money on phase. I actually think Boston's a better team. I think Boston can. I have Boston about a 53% chance of winning them, being this of winning this game. I think they can pull off the upset here. I would not be particularly surprised if they did. Um, yeah, like looking around, you're getting 14 points in the hard point. Boston plus 1.5 in the search phase has been okay at search. But they've been clutching in round 11s in search, so the plus 1.5 in search isn't bad. Control, yeah, that's phase thing. Phase is really good at control. Um, but outside of that, Boston can win the hard point. Boston can win the the search. My only thing is that I wish that minus 155 on the plus 1.5 was lower. I wish that plus 1.5 was like minus 120 plus like even money. I wish it was higher, but I can live with this for now. I can live with this. I can put some money on Boston here at this price. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I don't love Boston as much as you do, it sounds like, but I definitely do lean to that side. Um, but it's interesting. I do see some value on, both sides, especially when you break down the market a little further. Um, the money line, I don't really like either side. I think that's pretty appropriately priced. Minus 190, I'm seeing, yeah, for phase. And then, yeah, that plus 150 ish for Boston, we'll call it, is also about right. However, yeah, the map spread, just because Boston is a better hardpoint team, in my opinion, that plus 1.5, even though it's at minus 155, does have a little bit of value. And actually, I'd much prefer to take that plus 1.5 than the outright money line, just because we know if it goes to that game five phase, are probably going to be favored in it. Um, but breaking it down even further, I really, really like Boston map one. Just win it outright. Um, I took it at even money. It's now plus 110, so even better. But yeah, I have Boston as the better hard point team. They shouldn't be underdogs, even to a team as good as FaZe. And one thing to note, Boston are the higher seed in this match. They're the 3 seed, whereas FaZe are the 6 seed. If Boston picks to be Team A in the map veto process, that means that Game 1 hardpoint is going to be their map pick after vetoes have settled. So if that's a preferable hardpoint map for Boston, and they're the better hardpoint team to begin with, the plus 110 or even money or whatever it's listed at for Boston, if it's plus anything, it's just value to be had. So that's probably my favorite thing of anything that I see here. But if you want to play it a little safer, the plus 1.5 for Boston is also pretty nice. I would just shy away from the money line just because I think it's priced about right. I have this as a 62-38 game in terms of win probability in favor of FaZe. But right, that's the lowest we've seen FaZe in quite some time to a team that's, you know, they're Boston are good. Like they're the number 4 team in my power rankings, but it's a little shocking to see FaZe as, not a 70% favorite versus a team like Boston. They're only down towards, 60%. So um, that's how I like to play it. I'm with you with Boston, specifically that game one hard point. And I'd say don't even bother with the map spreads, right? It's 14.5 I see, but just take the better team on the map that they are likely going to pick. Um, of course, Boston could come out and elect to be Team B, in which case that search and destroy in game two will be their map pick, and the hard point in game one will be phases. But most teams, I believe, pick Team A and get that first hard point map picked. So yeah, I like Boston here. It's a really tough match for both of these teams to go at it right away. But yeah, such is the case, and someone's got to win it. I lean FaZe, probably a 3-2 victory, but Wouldn't be shocked if Boston win this and win this, probably 3-1 if they do.
Mhm. Next up, we've got Ultra versus LAG. Ultra minus 1.5, minus 110. LAG plus 1.5, minus 120. Ultra minus 260 on the money line. LAG plus 190. Over 4.5, plus 175. So my model very much likes the Ultra minus 1.5 here. I've got that about 67% chance. Now, the thing of it is, I think the model just has Toronto as just a better hardpoint team, and I think that's very fair. I think Toronto is a better hardpoint team. I think weird stuff happened in that game one where they played last weekend, and then game four happened, and then that just blew it out. Right, you're getting a 100 point clubbed. I think game one was really close. I think Toronto could have, should have won game one. They didn't, and then LAG just got crushed in game four. Right, and Toronto won the search. Toronto won the control, and then Toronto just cleans up there in the hard point game four. And this Toronto team is better than this LAG team. Like, LAG team is good. They're not a bad team, but this Toronto team is a good team. And again, watch. This will be on land. There'll be some sort of weird land curse, and Toronto will get crushed somehow, and they'll drop to losers bracket. But they should be able to beat this team. I'm putting it on the minus 1.5. I mean, there's not a lot of other things I'd particularly like. The minus 16.5 in the hard point isn't bad. Minus 1.5 in the search, that's not bad either. Toronto is very, very good at control. You're looking at minus 1.5 in the control. That's pretty tempting. LEG has not figured out that game mode yet. And then you're looking at that way. So yeah, I'm taking Toronto here. Give me Toronto. Something bad will happen, and this will make me look foolish. But I'm okay with that for now. I'm okay with taking this for now.
Yeah, I again am in agreement with you overall. I think yeah, Toronto is definitely the side to play here. Um, Pick your poison as to what you want to do. If you want to go money line, minus a map and a half. If you want to go individual maps, whatever, it's fine with me. You can make an argument for. One thing I would like to bring up is yeah, control. Right, LA Gorillas, even with the team change, they have not figured out that game mode at all. I believe they have 3 control wins on the year. They are, yeah, 3-9. That's a 25% win rate. They're last in my power rankings in that game mode. Toronto Ultra, 12-3 overall, 80% win rate. It's first in my power ranks. It's as huge of a control discrepancy as you can have. Um, and yeah, Toronto Ultra minus a round and a half in control could be pretty tempting. They already don't like to play Fortress, which is the map that goes to a round 5 the most, just because it's so defensive favored. They love playing Hotel. They don't mind El Asilo. LA Gorillas, you know, just it's bad everywhere. They have not won on El Asilo. Their hotel is 2-3 on the year. It's their best map, so I expect they'll let it through. It's Toronto's best map, and that's I think the best map to win in 4 rounds or less is play on hotel. If that's the case, yeah, Ultra could get it done very quickly. Um, so yeah, I lean Toronto in just about every way, but I think control minus a map and or excuse me minus a round and a half might be my favorite way to play it, specifically in this match.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of hotel most played control map. Actually, most played map in general. Like, I think um it's it's
Yeah,
it's one of the favorite. It's like the Bet365 has options for most played map. Most played control map Greenberg Hotel minus 334. Most played hardpoint map Hotel plus 162. Most played search map it's 350. Hotel is a little less played in search. You're seeing more Al Albagra Fortress is played more, but it's one of the more popular maps, and the thing of it is, it's fine because like we saw last year, Tuscan Search and Destroy was one of the most played, and or, sorry, Tuscan Control, and then it basically kind of replaced Tuscan Control replaced Tuscan Berlin replaced kind of Tuscan in Control, but it's actually good. Like, you can win on offense and or on defense. They're actually I think you're maybe slightly ish favored on offense on Hotel, maybe.
that I don't know about, but I remember seeing a stat about New York. and their performance on hotel control, and their offensive win rate is like ridiculous. It's like 80%, or maybe that's a little high. I can't remember exactly, but it's just astronomically high. But yeah, it's a great control map to watch just because it's very split offense defense. Al Bagra Fortress very defensive favored. It's it's honestly maybe more defensive favored than like Gavutu was last year, but I don't care because Al Bagra's designed in a way where you have a lot of engagements, right? It's the fastest map we play on in terms of just total engagements, total damage. So um, think of it as like if Bocage, I mean, it's not that small, but if Bocage from last year was a control map, it would look something like Fortress. So and then you have Elasilo. That one's not played a ton, but it's kind of the happy medium of, you have one control point that's pretty hard to get to, but if you're the offense, right, you can really push up forward, spawn kill for a while, try to get that harder control point and the easier control point afterwards. So, yeah, we have a nice variety of control maps, but if Toronto and LAG do end up squaring up on Hotel, I really, really like Toronto's chances of covering a round and a half in control. And let me just quick check on the price of that just to double check. Yeah, minus 105. I guess that's a little steeper than I thought it would be, but considering you have the best control team versus the worst control team, um, it makes sense that it could be a quick control.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So moving on to the last game for Friday. Optic versus Thieves. Optic minus 1.5 plus 165. Thieves plus 1.5 minus 220. Optic minus 155 on the money line. Thieves plus 120 over 4.5 plus 155. This one's tricky. I want to bet Optic here. I don't know. Like I've got Optic 61% chance to win, so there's not a lot of value. I actually have this priced exactly. So Bet365, the money line is minus one for Optic minus 163. My money line is exactly minus 163. So I have that bang on. Um Optic minus 1.5 has about a 35% chance, but Thieves minus 1.5 that minus 1.5 I have that a 26% chance. So maybe you just kind of like close your eyes and bet over 4.5. Be like, all right, somehow this goes to 5, and like it definitely can. Optic has taken teams to 5. Actually, you know what? Optic and Thieves have both taken teams to 5 actually pretty frequently. So maybe that's the play. It's a mess, right? Because I worry that someone's just gonna blow someone out. Because remember, this is the matchup that's the most like volatile, right? Whenever
Yeah,
we talk about Optic versus Thieves, it's always like, oh, okay, whatever you think is going to happen is not going to happen. This is not. It's the famous quote. This is not going to go the way you think this is going to go. Like every time when it's like, oh, this team's better and then this team's worse now. It's always you're like, oh, Optic will win and then Thieves 3-0 them, or like, oh, Thieves are dominant now. Optic's in on the downtrend and then all of a sudden Optic 3-0s Thieves, or some crazy thing. Is it possible we actually have a relatively competitive series? Because I could see either of these teams winning, honestly. And looking at the spreads, the book doesn't. But the book also has no idea what to do. The hard point spread is Optic plus 1.5. They're like, I don't know, whatever. It's like minus 115 each side, hard point money line. For the search and destroy, Optic is favored minus 1.5. Basic one plus 105. So they think Optic should win the the search, and they have Thieves favored in the control, which seems a little extreme. I don't think Optic's that bad at control. Um, but pretty close though. And then again, map 4. All right, we're back to evens on the hard point. And then map 5, then Optic's back to being favored in a search, right? So I don't know. It's such a weird. This is going to be a weird match, and I'd love to just sink in because I have 38% chance over 4.5, so that's value on plus the plus 155. I worry that I'm gonna do this and then something bad is gonna happen, and then someone's gonna get 3-0'd. I worry about that. What do you think? Are you with me that maybe just blind bet the over 4.5 and just watch, hopefully watch a good match, or what do you think?
Yeah, it feels like we're due to have one of these Thieves Optic matches go the distance. Because yeah, just in my head, it does feel like all we've seen lately between these teams are 3-0s either way. Um, but yeah, surprisingly, I do have Thieves favored in this match. Now, I will say, right, my numbers don't really take into account recent performance as much as yours. So when you consider, right, Optic are on this hot streak, they go 4-1. Um, in the qualifier stage, Thieves are only 2-3. It's like, okay, maybe I make Optic a slight favorite, but either way, I'm not. It's close to a 50-50. And out of all these games on Thursday, it has to be the closest in terms of just who is going to win. So overall, like I lean Thieves still, right? Let's remember, right? Thieves 2-3 in the stage because of tiebreakers over the other 2-3 teams. They get the winners bracket start, just barely. They get the 8 seed. They get to play the first seed overall. That's generally not a spot you want to be in. But this Optic team in the first overall seed, like of all the 1 seeds we'll see throughout the year, this might be the worst. And I know Optic fans might hate hearing that, but like look at the wins that happened for this team this stage, Optic specifically, right? Let's backtrack. So the game Scump was in, that was versus Boston right away. Scump's last game of his career, they win in game 5, right? They win the game 1 hard point, they win the game 3 control pretty convincingly, and then they win game 5 search. Boston squeaked out a hard point win in game 4 and had a pretty comfortable search and destroy game 2. So Optic, right, narrowly beat Boston. Scump retires. Okay, you've got this new lineup. Optic versus Seattle. Optic, again, a game 5 victory. They won both searches versus Seattle. What a surprise. And they also won in control. Seattle took care of business in hardpoint. And again, goes to show that Seattle can take out anybody in hardpoint. They stomped Optic that day. Granted, right, first game with the new lineup with Optic, but the Optic get the win. So another game 5 victory. They play Toronto then the day after in a game we're saying, right, this might be where Optic get their first loss of the stage. They come out, they take both hard points versus Toronto. They look good in the search. They only lose the control there. That was an impressive match for Optic. Um, just not having to go to that game 5 versus a very quality opponent was very impressive. Then you jump to just last week, right? They lose their opening match versus Vegas, dropping both hard points. That's concerning. Um, and then, I mean, they lose the control. The only one they win is Search and Destroy, which you would not expect for an Optic team versus Vegas. So yeah, that's their one loss of the stage. It was ugly. It was unexpected. And then obviously they have the reverse sweep versus FaZe. That went to a game 5, obviously. But you look at that just individual series, game by game. They got outscored in the hard point versus FaZe. They got outscored in the search and destroy. They were able to win hotel control in round 5. I mean, they got the win, but overall, I think FaZe, you could argue, outperformed them as a whole in that series. So yeah, Optic are the 1 seed. Congratulations. You play a Thieves team that's quality, a Thieves team that was without Kenny for a couple of their qualifier matches. This should be a doozy, and I think the plus 120 price on Thieves is enough to get me intrigued because I do have them as slight favorites in Hardpoint, and I do think Control is pretty much a 50-50, as is Search. So, with all that being said, I think a Thieves 3-1 honestly isn't out of the question here. But I'd rather just, I think, play the Thieves money line. Um, yeah, I just think people are overlooking Thieves because they've been kind of ho hum throughout the year. Major one, they were all right. They didn't crack the top 4, I believe, but they were okay. And then this stage, same kind of thing. But to me, they're a quality team, and Optic just aren't. They're not quite there yet, even though they have the 1 seed.
Yeah, they've still been very up and down this entire time, and it definitely has shown that. And I mean, again, this team has had a bunch of team changes basically three team changes. No, two team changes in just the qualifiers, right? They swapped out Dashy for Hook. Then they swapped out Scump for Dashy for Scump when Scump retired. But like that's it now. Like that's literally what we're. This is now that team. Like this is now they're 2 weeks post Scump retirement. They haven't. They've inconsistently figured out hardpoint. Apparently, they've only figured out hardpoint when playing against Toronto Ultra. Um, because I think aren't they not like no? They won one hardpoint against FaZe, so they are now in the 4 games they've played. They have won 3 hardpoints.
They
That's
won one against Boston as well, but that's
oh,
it.
okay.
Yeah.
So that no they no I meant since I meant in the 4 games since Scump since
Oh,
Scump retired.
sorry.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So that
Yes.
yeah no you're that's a good point though. No, that's a good point. That's again they played 2 hard points against Boston and they only so then okay so they've won 4 out of 4 hard points in 5 games. That's not great. That's not
No.
particularly strong stat. I'm not resting on that stat. So this is the thing, right? It's they haven't figured out hard point yet. They're decent at search, but not amazing at it, and control is so. They did have a pretty weak schedule though, right? Like they got to play they did have to play Toronto and
Ah,
they'd have to play FaZe, but like they had to play two of the better teams, but then the rest of the schedule they played Boston, they played Florida. I think they played Florida, yes, and then they played Paris, which they actually lost to Paris, hilariously enough. So like again, oh Paris, there you go, said it Paris, there you go.
whoops.
Have to bet five $5 on them now. I think yeah, five. I'll bet on them. I'll bet on them something on when they play on Friday. But no, this is the thing. See, the problem is when I was punching down on them. That's when I that's when they get their old name back. Um, no, this is the thing. So it's just it's a very weird time for them, and they haven't figured out their identity yet, and they're still trying to figure out are they like I think Scump was a leader in this team, and I think they're like, all right, cool, we're Dallas Empire again, but the leader on that team was like Krim and Clay, and then when Clay was gone, then Krim, and I think is Dashy the leader? I don't know. Is Ilya, Shotzi, right? Like this is the thing, right? They're still trying to find a leader. They're trying to find an identity. They don't like they're kind of all good in every mode, and that's apparently enough to beat FaZe and Toronto on a good day. But that's I don't know if that's enough to win a major. I don't think it is. So we're gonna have to see. This is gonna be an optic rebuilding project. This optic team is okay. They're gonna make champs. That's not a concern. But like, I I don't know how far they're gonna go in this tournament.
Yeah,
I
I
just
think
don't think they're strong enough. They're not established enough yet. I don't think.
I agree completely. I think just the overarching, point we're trying to make is just be cautious, right? Like you look at optic in the futures market and you're like, at first glance, it's like, what? That doesn't make sense. And I'm honestly kind of bummed that optic weren't bigger favorites in the outright winner market or even in the to reach the final market because they're the number one seed and they're optic Texas, right? I was expecting them to be maybe the second or third favorite, heck, even maybe the overall favorite to win the tournament. The books obviously are smart and put them at fourth. um, but I think the casual fan is going to see that like, oh, optic plus 550 to win the whole thing, plus 250 just to make the final. In their first match versus Thieves, they're only a minus 155 favorite on the money line. It's like at first glance, it all looks so enticing because this team did go 4-1. I would actually argue they had one of the tougher schedules, right? FaZe to me are the number 3 team in the league. Um, Boston are number 4. They played them. They played Toronto, who are my number 1. They played Vegas, who aren't slouches. Like they played a pretty decent schedule. They played Seattle, who were the runner-ups last major. So, all things considered, like it was an impressive showing for Optic. But I just worry that the 4-1 record they achieved should maybe actually be like a 3-2 record. Just when you look at individual maps and how close a lot of them were. So that's my one argument. They're the one seed. That's great, but you play a Thieves team that is solid. The Thieves to me are better than the eighth best team in the league. Optic are not the best team in the league, yet they have the one seed. So just be cautious with Optic, right? If they come out and look great against Thieves, maybe they're more deserving of this number one seed that they got, and maybe I'll have a different tone. Um, but yeah, just be careful because it looks so enticing at first glance when you think about their results specifically with this new lineup and getting wins against quality teams. So um, it should be a heck of a match. I'm glad this is the last one of the day because it hopefully will get to a map five. I know these tend not to get all the way there, but I don't know. I've got a funny feeling that this might be the first one in a while that goes the distance and is, just a super juicy matchup as a whole.
Yeah, I think so. So, all right. So after this, we will have more some more um basically the next bracket, so we can preview a little bit of that losers bracket. So the loser of Optic Thieves will play Florida. I've got both Optic and Thieves about high 50s. Optic 59% chance to beat Florida. Thieves about, well, 59.9, so 60% chance to beat Florida, and then the Thieves 56.7, so 57% chance to beat Florida. But again, those are pretty low numbers. Like that's only minus 150, minus 130 to beat Florida. Both those are 3-2s. Do you see a chance for an upset here with Florida against either Optic or Thieves? This Florida team has been so up and down this entire major. Like it's so hard to get a read on if they're decided to be good or not, or why they're benching Brack or anything like that.
Yeah. Obviously, if Florida plays Optic, right, upset alert, right, get ready because for whatever reason, Florida just have Optic's number. They played twice at Major One. They split those games, but Florida got the better of them in the one that mattered most. And then even going back to last year and the year prior, like Florida, when it comes time to the major, if they run into Optic, I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's just one of those weird coincidences where, the quote unquote worst team just upsets the better team. I think when Thieves beat LA Gorillas earlier this stage, I believe that happened. It was like the first time that LA Thieves had ever beaten LAG, and just knowing those organizations, it's like, how can that be possible? But yeah, for whatever reason, Mutineers show up versus Optic. But yeah, my numbers are similar to yours. In a hypothetical, if they played right now, I'd have Optic as 59% favorites over Mutineers, and I'd have Thieves as 64% favorites. So right in that same ballpark of about 60%, 65%. And both would probably win it the same way, right? Florida love search and destroy. They're great at it. I have them as better than both of those teams at search, but just, significant underdogs in hardpoint and in control. Control less so, but yeah, for Florida, it feels like all of their series wins this year are just going to be 2-3-5. Winning both searches, winning a control. So they've got a shot, right? They're not huge underdogs to either team, according to my numbers. So yeah, very realistic chance that we see Optic or LA Thieves have a really disappointing major and bow out with an 0-2 record. We'll see what the price is when the time comes, but I have a funny feeling that Florida might be an okay value, and I think I'd like them more on the money line than the plus 1.5, just with all things considered, with how good they are at search. And, if they win the series, it probably goes to that game five anyway. So, yeah, I think Florida are, you could make a case the second best team in losers bracket. I don't know if you can make the case that they're the best, but um, so far it's been okay with Dave Patty on the team. Search and Destroy really hasn't fallen off for them that much, which surprises me a little bit. So if Dave Patty can come in, keep their search consistent, but elevate their respawn just a little bit, yeah, this Florida team can be one of these spoiler teams in the tournament for sure.
Yeah. Moving on um, to the kind of other side of the bracket, Toronto or LAG versus Vegas. We actually talked a little bit about that match already. Vegas, any, I have Toronto as a massive favorite. LAG is a slight favorite, basically even because of that. Again, because of the strength of that Vegas game five, right? They get to a game five, they can beat anybody, right? So maybe we'll kind of pass over that one. what do we think about Seattle here? I've got Boston and Atlanta actually hilariously both the exact same, both 80% favorites. Phase 80.5, Boston 80.4. So basically dead even. It's the exact same money line. Both slight underdogs to cover the -1.5. Both like 40 some odd percent to cover the -1.5. Do you think those numbers are correct? If you're Seattle, which of these teams would you rather play? Is there a team you'd rather play or not rather play of those two?
Honestly, that's a really good question. According to my numbers, you'd rather play Boston, um, but either matchup is tough. I do have Seattle favored a little more than you do in both matchups. I have Boston versus Seattle about a 60-40 in favor of Boston, and I have Atlanta Seattle about a 70-30. Um, so that just goes to show that my numbers do still believe in phase quite a bit, or at least are quite a bit over Seattle. Um, yeah. So who would you rather have, right? If you're a Seattle fan and you're sitting there with the hope of like, okay, we know Search and Destroy has to improve. It's abysmal. Let's say our search is better, right? Let's say we continue improving, we turn these round 11 losses into round 11 wins, right? If that's the case and you're competitive in Search and Destroy all of a sudden, I think you'd rather play FaZe, right? Even though FaZe are a phenomenal search team, I actually think they're worse at hardpoint and at control than Boston is. So I think that opens up your path a little more. If it's same old with Seattle and your search is still horrendous, I'd rather you play Boston because Boston is not great at search either. They're just a you have a better shot at winning game 2 or game 5 if you run into Boston and your search is still what it has been. So, I don't know. It's a really good question. I would lean Boston just because I don't think Surge has figured out their search quite yet. Signs that it's improving, but um, I just think it's way more likely they get a search win versus Boston, even if the hardpoint and control are a little tougher. But yeah, I'd rather go up against Boston. But honestly, like good luck to Seattle because these are two teams that are quality, and the fact that you're going to play it one of them right away is just tough luck, honestly.
Yeah. Moving on to the last matchup in the losers bracket there. You've got New York or Minnesota versus London. I got both of these as mid 70% favorites against London. Both slightly favored in the 50% chance to cover the -1.5s. Um, what's wrong with this London team? Does this London team have a chance at all? Like, what is wrong? Like,
They do against Rocker. They don't against Subliners. Like it would shock me if Subliners somehow lose to Rocker that they could lose again to Ravens. Like, you know, Ravens were okay this stage. I believe they went 2-3. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they got reverse swept by Minnesota. That stung. Um, Let me double check that record actually. London, let me backtrack. Lost to Florida in game 5. That was their most recent match. They beat Las Vegas in game 4. They got swept by LA Thieves with a substitute player, I believe.
yes,
Yeah, that was that weekend because Thieves got swept and then swept, so that hurts. Um, and then the games before that, yes, reverse swept by Minnesota and lost to Toronto. So they only do have one match win. That was versus Vegas. Um, yeah, it's gonna be tough for them to beat New York if New York somehow fall down to losers bracket. Minnesota, right? We just saw, right? You were one match away. You got reverse swept. If it is Rocker, right? They're London for how bad they are. Their hard point is actually pretty okay. Um, it feels like if they're gonna win series, as strange as it sounds, being the worst team in the league, they're probably gonna do it in a map 4, right? Like they're gonna have to take both hard points and probably more likely a control than a search and destroy. because their search and destroy is on Seattle's level, in my opinion, of it's just that bad. Um, and New York are just far superior to Minnesota in every aspect. That like, if you somehow run into them, like just pray, I guess, if you're a London fan, because that is going to be tough. Um, Again, you have a shot in hardpoint, but New York are dominant search players. They're dominant in control, and London just haven't been good at those modes pretty much the entire year. So yeah, it'll be tough. And again, it's part of the reason why I like being a Minnesota fan this weekend is right. Even if you lose your first match versus a very good team, you get to fall down and play London, who you struggled with earlier in the qualifier stage, but maybe redeem yourself, win a little nicer, a little cleaner than you did last time around. So, um, yeah, prospects aren't high for London. Again, they're doing the Paul X scraps lineup, so Zero is still on the bench, I believe. Um, yeah, mixed results with that lineup. I don't think it improves the team at all. I don't think it makes the team significantly worse without Zero in the lineup. It's just kind of lateral, in my opinion. Um, just a team that I worry might, their chemistry is already lacking, it seems. And I've heard rumors of, maybe Asim wants to get out because he's had a good year, actually. Um, Scraps has been okay, honestly, since he's come into the league, but it's so hit or miss with London. I really think they'll be a one and done team this tournament.
Yeah, it's so weird. I think there's issues with Nasty and Zero, and Paul X hasn't had the greatest things either. It's just it's a big mess there with London, and I don't know how they fix that, honestly. Like, power to them. I mean, they looked so promising last year, and then they lost Afro, and uh, yeah, they lost Afro. They kept Nasty, Gizmo. Whatever happened with Gizmo? Like, it's just such a weird year for them last year. They were looked so promising at times, and then now we're back to this again, and it's
Yeah,
sad. You want this
it
London team
feels
to
a
be
lot
good.
like yeah, it feels like a lot like the Cold War team they
Yeah.
had, which was just consistently, a bottom four team. They had their moments, right? They brought Afro in late in the year. He brought a spark. Paul X was on that team as well. Like I think this team is one that's gonna try to patch it together all throughout the year, and they'll just try a bunch of different lineups, and maybe one of them sticks eventually. But yeah, this one right now that's Asim, Nasty, Scraps, and Paul. It's no, it's not quite there yet. Again, you can make a case that a number of these guys should be benched in favor of somebody else. Um, or just challengers player, right, more challengers players maybe. I don't know what the solution is, but I just know I've seen enough from this core that yeah, they're the worst team in the league. They're still okay, right? They're not what Legion have been over the past couple of years. They're a competitively bad team, but enough to win over New York or Minnesota, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, that's gonna do it for us this week. Follow us on Twitter, obviously at LeanTossup Sports, at LT Sports, and at CDL Metrics. Um, to follow along, we're gonna be posting our projections all through the weekend, and I'm sure you're gonna have your odds to win the major as well. I'll probably have some of that as well. So yeah, let's we will and we're going to be off for a couple of, I think, basically actually just a week. I think it's either a week or two
Correct.
weeks. Yeah, I
Just
think we're,
1 week, I
yeah,
think.
just 1 week. Yeah, but then we're right back to the grind on after the 17th. So yeah, we will be back. We will be off for 1 week, and then we will be back. But honestly, I'm really excited for this major. I always love majors. They're always really exciting. And yeah, it's the best weekends of college you have, because when it's just like 3-4-3, it gets really kind of boring. Some matches are good, some matches are not good, but I think uh, I think when we're looking at this, and we're in a major weekend, those are always a good weekend. It's always a good weekend when you have a major. So, all right, see you guys. We will see you in 2 weeks, and have a great weekend of watching COD, everybody.